Yeah, the play was 3 hours long. If you imagine if you had white people rapping, it might have been 4 hours.
I found it a little representative of reverse discrimination, although there were some white dancers I noticed in there, but still, I love history, so I have all the respect. And I remember when Miranda told Obama that he was writing a play on Hamilton, a rap musical on Hamilton, and Obama's kind of looked at him like, "Why would you do that?" Good luck with that.
I love history, not to the same depth that you do, but listening to Benjamin Franklin's biography, the biography of Hamilton, and others, it's just you don't get that history in a history book, and
No,
you don't get that history book in most areas. It's the depth of those. I mean, that's why there are 1,000 pages.
and
I
why
mean,
don't you?
Welcome to Peter and Phil's Courageous Conversations, a podcast addressing race relations and social issues in hopes that you'll be inspired to do the same. Now, let's begin our conversation with your hosts, Dr. Peter Weinstein and Dr. Philip Nelson.
Speaking of traffic, it took Vincent almost 10 hours to get down here, and he left on Wednesday, thinking he was leaving early. And did you? I don't know if you saw it on TV, but they had a picture of traffic in LA on the I-10 I-5 exchange. I think it was it was a beautiful picture, just all red lights, bumper to bumper going one way, and white lights bumper to bumper going the other way.
I was there.
Were you?
Yeah, we went up to Pantages for the matinee of Hamilton, 2 o'clock. Get done at 5. So we were in the car at 5:15 or so, heading from Hollywood and trying to head home, and took us 2 hours and 15 minutes for what should take about 45 minutes. And it's like, I plugged it into my GPS because I was trying to find the shortest route home. And no matter what, the longer we drove, the longer the trip became. Don't you hate it when you're looking at your trip and it's getting longer instead of shorter?
Yep. And you couldn't have gotten home on surface roads.
Not from LA. It would have
Mhm.
taken us even longer. So once we got into Orange County, the minute we crossed from LA into Orange County, because the construction is mostly in LA right now on the 5,
Mhm.
took us normal time. But from downtown through Hollywood, through the 5, the 710, the 605, to just about Valley View, it was bumper to bumper. No accidents, no cop cars pulled over, just just a daisy chain of cars. And so, yeah, the dogs were waiting with their legs crossed.
I feel for you.
I'm sure.
No, I really do, because I saw that and I kept thinking, oh, I am so glad I didn't choose to go into that.
And I thought going to a matinee wouldn't be so
Yeah.
bad, but boy, that was stupid.
So
And so
how did you like Hamilton?
I loved it. I mean, we saw it when it was in Orange County a couple of years ago, and
Mhm.
then we've watched the movie.
Disney Plus. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the original, of course, was unbeatable and unbelievable. But the story, after watching the movie, I listened to the book, excuse me, the play. I listened to the book upon which the movie was based. And the insights into American history and the discussions even then about slavery and Virginia versus the South versus the North, and all of the different things that have kind of set the tone to get us to where we are right now, which isn't much further than we were back then. We've made progress.
I understand what you're saying. We've made progress, but places where we haven't made progress makes you want to qualify the progress we've made.
There's a certain irony in the Hamilton casting of so many people of color
Yes.
playing these roles that were so white, so British 200 plus years ago.
I noticed that myself. I don't know if I call it irony. Well, first of all, I don't know what what's his name?
Lin-Manuel Miranda.
Yeah, could have done because, first of all, he wrote a rap musical.
Yes.
So trying to find enough white characters to play George Washington and Hamilton and all the others, or a French person to play
Lafayette.
Lafayette,
Yeah.
might have been a little difficult. But I don't think he cared about that because, first of all, he was in theater and he was trying to break the stereotype,
Right.
right? And give jobs to people who don't normally get jobs.
Right.
So there are a lot of reasons for seeing people of color playing almost all the parts, except for the king. But you could have had somebody of color playing the king too, for that matter.
Yeah, the play was 3 hours long. If you imagine if you had white people rapping, it might have been 4 hours.
I found it a little representative of reverse discrimination. Although there were some white dancers, I noticed in there, but still, I love history, so I have all the respect. And I remember when Miranda told Obama that he was writing a play on Hamilton, a rap musical on Hamilton, and Obama kind of looked at him like, "Why would you do that?" Good luck with that.
I love history, not to the same depth that you do, but listening to Benjamin Franklin's biography, the biography of Hamilton, and others, it's just you don't get that history in a history book.
No.
And you don't get that history book in most areas. It's the depth of those. I mean, that's why there are 1,000 pages.
And why don't you? And I think it's because it takes a lot to understand perspective, to truly understand perspective.
Right.
You have to understand the person to understand the motive. And you have to understand the motive to understand the actions.
The history books give you bite-sized pieces of fact that you can regurgitate in a test or an exam, and you're asked to make your own assessment of that information. The true biographies, the in-depth biographies, do dive much deeper into the history of Hamilton from the islands and growing up there and the family challenges and everything else that's nowhere in the history books to give you, as you said, some perspective of his background before he got into the leadership roles that he had.
I didn't understand until, I still don't understand, but I didn't recognize how important being an orphan was in that day.
Yeah.
I actually betrayed the point. It wasn't that being an orphan was important. It was having a father was important. Having a lineage was important. That because it was family that survived. It was family that surpassed. It was family that had success. And to do it on your own by yourself was unheard of. That's what made being an orphan important. Hamilton spent a lot of his time, according to this version of history, spent a lot of his time trying to be recognized. They even used it in the play. There's a difference between new money and old money.
Right. And if we go back 100, 200 years, the women had virtually no leadership roles.
Right.
So, the father figure was the figure that you followed as the male heir. But was interesting how influential Martha Washington was, or Abigail Adams was, that we know their names, and that in the founding fathers, the mothers had a role from that standpoint as well. It's much harder to think about the spouses of the current presidents, except for maybe Michelle Obama, having had such influential roles that we can think back of and remember their names.
Well, I think Hillary Clinton is about is as influential as Michelle.
Correct. Well, Hillary had a leadership role beyond Bill, but you're correct. But I think of Barbara Bush, and I think of, and there it ends. Well, Jackie Kennedy. You can
Jackie,
think
yeah.
of the names.
Eisenhower.
Yes, Mamie, Lady Bird Johnson.
I think you're debasing your own argument now.
Yeah, now I am. Now that I'm thinking about it.
Exactly, and the reason is because of the suffrage movement. All
Yes.
right? You are right about the past. That the fact that we can remember any woman's name during the colonial days makes those women stupendous. That they made a mark in history, right? But since suffrage, women have gradually carved a space for themselves as the new spouse, as the new spousal role.
Yeah.
And they're not there just as a spouse. They're not just a support, they're not a trophy, and they're not just the supporting unit. And if they choose to be, that's fine. That's their choice now, rather than their expectation. So what was Hamilton's wife's name?
Eliza.
And you know that because of song, or do
No,
you?
because actually the story is Eliza's story. Because she is such a central figure in the play, and she's actually a very central figure in his history even after he died, because she created the first orphanage system in the United States.
But did you know that before the play?
No.
That's what I'm saying.
Not at all. Not at all. But I do retract that statement a little bit, because I start to think of people like Eleanor Roosevelt.
Right.
And sometimes you get lost in old history, and recent history is there, but it just doesn't come up as much because your focus was there because of Hamilton. But the patriarchy has moved in many degrees to a matriarchy. And I think in the South there may have been a lot more of a matriarchy in many times, because correct me if I'm wrong, but your mom was home when you got home from school.
Absolutely. No, my mom was a housewife.
Yeah.
My mom did not have a college degree, which hampered her too, in terms of, but she also didn't have the ambition for that. And that too has affected my perspective as well about male-female relationships. And I know that, but not my mom, my dad created that. That is a battle I have to have within myself daily in order to assure equanimity among the sexes. I have to admit that I have an implicit bias there. It's difficult to overcome training if you don't face it. My dad didn't want me to iron my clothes. That was not a man's job. My mom had to iron my clothes until I became a Boy Scout. And when I became a Boy Scout, I had to be prepared. And my mom used that excuse as much as she could. Before I knew it, I was ironing my own clothes, because that's part of being a Boy Scout. My mom continued to iron my clothes for me to go to school and stuff, but it wasn't taboo anymore if I wanted my favorite shirt to go out to iron it myself. Now I had two sisters also, and my job was to cut the grass and take out the trash. Their job was to wash dishes. They never learned to cook while I was there, but now my dad was a cook, except that he didn't cook at the house.
Yeah, that's right. It's like, when you get home from doing it all day, it's the last thing you want to do.
Yeah. And when he did cook, my mom didn't want him to cook because he messed the kitchen up and he didn't wash dishes. So
you're balancing a different mindset from the way you were raised, and I would suggest where I was raised, there was a parallel. My parents were both equally successful in their skill sets in their lives, and so I always looked at women as being successful as well as men. And my mom was a school teacher. She was a biology teacher. Then she owned her own small business. She was busy leading her own life. My dad was busy with his. I think I was raised with almost a mother dominant family from that standpoint. as well, but mainly because she was always in the workplace.
Yeah.
She wasn't at home. That's why we had a nanny.
Mm. My mom ran a tight ship at home. She always had meals prepared. It was always on time. She ate with us. My dad was often at work while we would eat dinner. Summers, she hated summers because the kids were at home.
And so was your dad.
No, no, not in the summer.
No.
No, no. There was always somebody needed to eat at the university.
Yeah, true, I guess.
But the kids be at home, and so she'd lock us out the house because she got tired of hearing the door slam. You know, she'd buy a bunch of plastic cups and put a pitcher of ice water on the carport and tell us that's your water. Don't come in unless you need some more. And it didn't matter how hot it was, we were stuck outside. We had to figure out how to entertain ourselves. She was stern. We called her mean. In retrospect, she was stern, but I never thought of her less. I knew a lot of professional women too. A lot of our friends were professional women, a lot of her friends, but she carried herself well. As a matter of fact, I remember hearing conversations of some of those women saying they wish they could be at home.
Your mom was a high school graduate.
Yes.
In an era that not all high school graduates, women went on to college.
Right.
No matter where you were, north, south, east, or west.
No matter where you were.
Right.
Actually, at the end of an era when a lot of people weren't high school graduates.
Right.
She got out of high school and went straight into the workforce. She met my father in Washington, D.C. because she was working at George Washington University. And he was in food service administration. He was, I think, an assistant director of food service at George Washington University. And when he saw her, she was putting something on the bulletin board and she was reaching up and he thought she had the prettiest ankles.
Is that what he said?
He had ever seen, because that's all he could see, because the dress was just above the.
That's right. Right now, if you're on a ladder and you're looking at somebody's ankles, the dress is a lot higher.
Yes.
So
Yes, he couldn't see more than. And
forgot about that era. No, with the upbringing that I had, there was no question that women received the respect that they deserved and earned. It was just, my mom made sure of that. She was the dominant personality in the household from that standpoint.
My dad was a dominant personality in the household, but my mom was no pushover.
Right.
And it was clear what her role was in support of my dad. I don't think I could count on one hand, probably because I probably didn't want to remember them, but I can't count on one hand the fights that my mom and dad had in front of me.
Right. I can't either. They probably occurred.
Oh, I know they occurred. I could tell
when
they were angry with each other, but to see fights.
Right. It didn't happen.
It didn't happen. It rarely happened. And then when it did happen, you had to sleuth it to find out that it happened. I remember once or twice my mom waiting up for my dad and being angry because he wasn't home. But that didn't happen often either.
No, I don't remember those. I'm sure they occurred. I'm sure there's latent memories that will come out at some point in time under hypnosis by some sort of shrink who wants to put me on Jerry Springer. But at the moment they led the household, they ran the household, but I can't remember anything. And my mom died in 1999, and there are times that I was just interested to see how she would have dealt with the last 20 some odd years.
Yeah.
My dad died 6 years ago, and we used to have conversations about all of these different things, politics and business and everything else. But my mom took no guff from nobody. And, my uncle, my mom's younger brother, there was only one person in the world who scared the heck out of him, and that was my mom, because she was the one person who took no guff from anybody. My dad, my grandfather, my uncle, my father, she was just a tough woman, soft, but tough from that standpoint. because I think in many ways she was not given the opportunities to accomplish everything that she wanted because she probably should have gone to medical school, but that wasn't really an era that as many women went to medical school in the 40s. And so my uncle, who was the one who went to medical school and became an MD, PhD, got all the attention, but she was just as smart as he was. So I got the biology from my mother, I got the business from my father, and I've been using both of them since I can remember.
That's great.
It's,
That's great.
Thank you for joining us for another courageous conversation. Be sure to follow us and check back next week for more.
On behalf of the Courageous Conversations family, Dr. Phil Nelson and myself, I'd like to wish everybody a really happy holiday season and a wonderful 2022. And we look forward to engaging you further with courageous conversations in the new year.